I should have known that buying a house in rural Minnesota with an HOA would come back to bite me, but the deal was too good to pass up. The 40-acre property sat on the edge of Wilmer, with enough land to give me privacy and room for the workshop I'd always dreamed of. I'm Owen Strickland, and I'm a custom furniture maker who needed space to work without neighbors complaining about the sound of power tools. The previous owner had warned me about the HOA president, but I figured I could handle whatever small-town politics came my way. I was wrong. The house itself was a solid 2-story craftsman with a detached garage that I'd already converted into my workshop. The property line extended right up to a small commercial lot that the HOA owned collectively, some kind of community space they rented out occasionally for events. Between my property and theirs, the wind came screaming across the open fields every winter, piling snow into drifts that could reach 10 feet high if you weren't careful. That's why, back in October, I'd spent an entire weekend installing a snow fence along my property line, driving 72 posts into the ground at precise intervals. Each post was 5 feet tall, sturdy treated lumber that I'd painted bright orange so they'd be visible against the white landscape. I'd strung high tensile plastic mesh between them, creating a barrier that would catch the snow before it reached my driveway and workshop. The system had cost me nearly $3,000 in materials and 2 full days of backbreaking labor, but it was worth it. The first winter storm in November proved that, with the snow piling up harmlessly on the field side while my property remained clear. December rolled around without incident. I kept to myself, working on a commissioned dining set for a client in Minneapolis, enjoying the peace and quiet of rural life. The HOA had their annual Christmas party at the community lot, and I could hear the music from my workshop, but didn't bother attending. I wasn't much for forced socialization, and from what I'd gathered, the HOA meetings were more about gossip and petty complaints than anything substantive. The president was a woman named Patricia Henderson, a 47-year-old real estate agent who apparently ran the association like her personal fiefdom. I'd met her once during the closing process, and she'd given me a tight smile that never reached her eyes while informing me that she expected all homeowners to maintain community standards. I'd nodded politely and made a mental note to avoid her whenever possible. January brought the kind of cold that makes your nostrils freeze when you breathe in. The temperature dropped to -15 degrees, and the wind chill made it feel like -40. I was in my workshop on a Wednesday afternoon, working on finishing a mahogany bookshelf, when I heard a truck pull up outside. I figured it was a delivery, so I wiped my hands on my apron and stepped outside, immediately regretting not grabbing my heavier coat. A white pickup truck was parked near my snow fence, and 2 men in reflective vests were pulling up my fence posts. Not removing the mesh, just yanking the posts right out of the frozen ground with a portable auger mounted on the truck bed. "Hey!" I shouted, jogging toward them despite the cold burning my lungs. "What the hell are you doing?" The closer man, a younger guy with a patchy beard, looked up with mild surprise. "HOA authorized it. We're just doing what we were hired for." "Authorized what?" "Those are my posts on my property line." I was close enough now to see that they'd already removed about 15 posts, loading them into the truck bed like they were harvesting crops. "The order says to collect posts along the community lot boundary for event signage. Got it right here." He pulled a crumpled work order from his pocket. I snatched it from his hand, my fingers already going numb. The paper had the HOA letterhead and Patricia Henderson's signature, authorizing the removal of temporary fencing posts for use in their Winter Wonderland market scheduled for the following weekend. "These aren't temporary." This is a permanent snow fence installation that I put in myself on my property. I could feel my blood pressure rising despite the cold. You need to put these back right now. The older man, who'd been quiet until now, finally spoke up. Look, buddy, we just do what the work order says. You got a problem. Take it up with the HOA. We're not getting in the middle of it. You're already in the middle of it. You're destroying my property based on an illegal authorization from someone who has no authority over my land. I pulled out my phone, struggling with the touch screen through my work gloves. I'm calling the sheriff. Go ahead, the younger guy said, shrugging. But we were told to get 30 posts today, and that's what we're doing. You can sort out the property line dispute with your HOA. I did call the sheriff, but the dispatcher informed me that it would be at least 45 minutes before a deputy could respond to a non-emergency property dispute. By then, these guys would be long gone. I stood there in the brutal cold, watching helplessly as they methodically removed another dozen posts before apparently hitting their quota and driving off. I counted the damage once they left. 27 of my 72 posts were gone, leaving a gaping hole in my snow fence right in the section that faced the prevailing wind. The mesh sagged uselessly without the posts to support it. I immediately drove to Patricia Henderson's house, a McMansion on the other side of the development that looked like it belonged in a suburb rather than rural Minnesota. I knocked hard enough that the decorative wreath nearly fell off. She answered wearing yoga pants and a fleece pullover, her blonde hair pulled back in a ponytail, looking annoyed at the interruption. Owen, isn't it? What can I do for you? Her tone suggested she already knew exactly why I was there. Your contractors just stole 27 of my snow fence posts. I want them back immediately, and I want compensation for the damage to my property. I kept my voice level, but I could feel the anger simmering just below the surface. She tilted her head, her expression shifting to one of practiced sympathy. Oh, those posts. We needed signage holders for the Winter Wonderland market. Since they were just sitting there on the boundary line, I assumed they were communal property. The HOA bylaws state that anything on the property line is subject to HOA jurisdiction. That's not how property lines work, Patricia. My survey clearly shows those posts are on my land, 6 inches inside my boundary. You had no right to touch them, and I want them returned today. Well, that's going to be difficult. The posts have already been distributed to various vendors for the market. They're being used as sign holders throughout the community lot. You're welcome to come by after the market concludes on Sunday and collect them yourself. She started to close the door, but I put my hand against it. The market is 3 days away. Do you understand what happens when you remove a snow fence 3 days before a major storm system? Have you checked the weather forecast? The National Weather Service had been warning all week about a massive winter storm expected to hit Friday night through Saturday. I'm sure your property will be fine, Owen. You're being dramatic about a few wooden posts. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have dinner to prepare. She pushed harder on the door, and I reluctantly removed my hand. The door clicked shut, and I heard the deadbolt slide into place. I drove back home as the sun was setting, painting the snow-covered fields in shades of orange and pink that would have been beautiful if I wasn't so furious. I spent the evening researching property law, HOA regulations, and my legal options. The problem was that any legal remedy would take weeks or months, and the storm was coming in 2 days. I could try to jury-rig a temporary fence with the remaining posts, but the gap was too large to be effective. I could buy new posts and try to install them, but the ground was frozen solid now, and I didn't have the equipment to drill through it. I was essentially helpless, and Patricia Henderson knew it. Thursday morning, I drove to the community lot to see what they'd done with my posts. The scene was worse than I'd imagined. My orange-painted posts had been hammered into the ground throughout the lot, each one holding a hand-painted sign advertising different vendors for the Winter Wonderland market. Hot cocoa this way, handmade crafts, Santa photos here. The posts that I'd carefully selected, treated, and painted were now cheap signage holders for a community event I hadn't even been properly invited to. I took photos of everything, documenting each post and its location. Several vendors were already setting up their booths, and I recognized some faces from around town. Nobody made eye contact with me. I tried the reasonable approach one more time. I called Patricia and offered a compromise. I'd let her use the posts for the market if she'd have them returned and reinstalled by Monday morning, with the HOA covering the reinstallation cost. She laughed, actually laughed, and told me I should be more community-minded. This is what being part of an HOA means, Owen. We share resources for the greater good. Maybe if you'd attended any meetings, you'd understand that. Sharing implies consent, Patricia. This is theft. I hung up before she could respond. I was done being reasonable. The weather forecast grew more ominous throughout Thursday. The National Weather Service upgraded their winter storm warning to a blizzard warning, predicting 30 to 40 inches of snow with sustained winds of 35 miles per hour and gusts up to 60. It would be the worst storm to hit central Minnesota in a decade. The storm was expected to begin Friday evening and continue through Saturday night. The Winter Wonderland market was scheduled for Saturday from 10 in the morning until 6 in the evening. I knew what I had to do. Friday morning dawned cold and gray, with thin clouds moving in from the northwest. I waited until I saw Patricia's car leave her driveway around 9, probably heading to her real estate office. Then, I loaded a portable auger, a cordless impact driver, and a sledgehammer into my truck and drove to the community lot. The vendors weren't setting up yet, too early in the morning and with the storm approaching. The lot was empty except for my stolen posts, standing like sentinels advertising an event that was about to become impossible. I started at the far end of the lot, using the auger to loosen the frozen ground around each post before pulling them free. It was hard work, even with power tools, but anger is a powerful motivator. I methodically worked my way through the lot, pulling every single one of my posts and loading them into my truck bed. Some had signs zip-tied to them. Others had decorative ribbons. I left all the decorations on the ground where they fell. It took me nearly 3 hours to recover all 27 posts, but by noon, I had every single one of them back. I drove home and spent the afternoon attempting to reinstall them in their original positions. The frozen ground made it nearly impossible, but I managed to get about half of them back in place before my hands were too numb and my shoulders too exhausted to continue. It would have to be enough. The gap in my fence was smaller now, though still present. I could only hope it would be enough to prevent the worst of the snow from reaching my property. The first call from Patricia came at 2:30. "What did you do? Where are all the signposts?" "You mean my property that was stolen? I recovered it. It's back on my land where it belongs." I was in my workshop, warming up with a cup of coffee and watching the clouds thicken. "You've sabotaged the Winter Wonderland market. Do you have any idea how many people are expecting this event? Families with children. We have vendors who paid for booth space." Her voice had risen to a near shriek. "Then I suggest you find alternative signage. Hardware stores sell stakes and posts. Of course, with the blizzard coming, you might want to consider postponing the event altogether." I kept my tone neutral, professional even. "We are not postponing. We've been advertising this for 6 weeks. You're going to bring those posts back right now, or I'll call the sheriff and report you for theft and destruction of HOA property. Please do call the sheriff, Patricia. I'd love to hear you explain how my posts, installed on my property line, somehow became HOA property. I have receipts for every post, photos of the original installation, and survey documents showing they're on my land. What documentation do you have? Silence stretched on the other end of the line. That's what I thought. Don't contact me again about this. I hung up and turned off my phone. I'd said my piece. The rest was up to the weather. The storm rolled in right on schedule Friday evening. I was in my house, workshop secure and truck parked in the garage, when the first flakes started falling around 6. Within an hour, the snow was coming down so hard I couldn't see my workshop from my kitchen window. The wind had picked up too, that howling prairie wind that had necessitated the snow fence in the first place. I made dinner, checked that I had plenty of firewood for the stove, and settled in to wait out the storm. Through my front window, facing away from the community lot, I could see the snow piling up in long, elegant drifts exactly where my intact fence sections directed it. The gaps where I hadn't been able to reinstall posts showed the problem immediately, with snow starting to accumulate closer to my buildings, but the majority of my property was protected. Saturday morning, I woke to a world buried in white. The snow was still falling heavily, though the wind had temporarily died down. I bundled up and went outside to assess the situation. My property was in decent shape, all things considered. The snow had drifted into the gaps in my fence, leaving some piles near my driveway, but nothing I couldn't handle with my plow blade. I climbed onto the roof of my workshop to get a better vantage point, and what I saw made me catch my breath. The community lot was completely buried. Without any snow fence to catch and direct the wind-driven snow, the entire area had become one massive drift field. The prevailing wind had pushed the snow across the open lot, piling it against the far tree line in drifts that had to be 8 or 9 feet tall. The vendor booths that had been partially set up were barely visible, just lumps under the snow. The parking area was indistinguishable from the rest of the lot. The entrance from the main road was blocked by a drift that crossed the entire opening. It looked like a photograph of Antarctica. My posts, the ones I hadn't been able to recover and reinstall, were completely invisible somewhere under the snow. I climbed down and went back inside, feeling a mixture of satisfaction and concern. I'd proven my point about the necessity of the snow fence, but the destruction to the community lot was extensive. Then again, I tried to warn Patricia. She'd made her choice. The calls and text messages started around 9. My phone had been charging overnight, so it automatically turned back on, and the notifications came flooding in. Patricia had called 14 times and sent 23 text messages, progressing from angry to desperate to threatening. The HOA vice president, a man named Gerald Murphy, had also called several times. I ignored all of them and made breakfast. The snow continued throughout the day Saturday. Around noon, the wind picked back up and the real blizzard conditions set in. Visibility dropped to near zero, and I could hear the wind shrieking around the house. I was grateful for the solid construction of my home and workshop. I spent the day working on smaller projects in my house, staying warm and comfortable while the storm raged outside. Occasionally, I'd check the community lot through my binoculars. At one point, I saw a truck trying to plow the entrance, but it gave up after about 20 minutes. The snow was coming down too fast, and the drifts were too deep. The storm finally broke Sunday morning. I woke to eerie silence and brilliant sunshine. The sky was that perfect crystalline blue you only get after a major winter storm, and the snow sparkled like someone had scattered diamonds across the landscape. I ventured outside to find nearly 36 inches of fresh snow on my property, but thanks to my snow fence, it was manageable. My driveway and the area around my workshop were accessible with just a few hours of plowing. The community lot, however, looked like a disaster zone. I was clearing my driveway when a sheriff's deputy pulled up, lights flashing. Deputy Martinez, according to his nameplate, was a middle-aged Hispanic man with a tired expression that suggested he'd been dealing with storm-related calls all morning. "Mr. Strickland, I need to ask you some questions about the community lot situation." He stayed in his patrol vehicle with the engine running, probably wanting to stay warm. I walked over to his window. "Happy to answer anything. What's the situation?" "Patricia Henderson filed a complaint alleging that you deliberately sabotaged the community lot's snow management system, causing extensive property damage. She's claiming tens of thousands of dollars in damages and wants you charged with criminal mischief." He pulled out a notepad, but his tone suggested skepticism. "Did she tell you that the snow management system she's referring to consisted of my personal property that she stole from my land?" I kept my voice calm and factual. "I have documentation if you'd like to see it." Deputy Martinez sighed. "Why don't you walk me through what happened, start to finish?" I spent the next 20 minutes explaining the situation, showing him photos on my phone of the original snow fence installation, the work order authorizing the removal of my posts, the posts being used as sign holders, and finally, my recovery of my own property. I showed him my survey documents proving the posts were on my land and my receipts for the materials. He took notes throughout, occasionally asking clarifying questions. "So let me make sure I understand," he said when I finished. "You installed a snow fence on your property at your own expense. The HOA took your posts without permission and used them for their event. You removed your posts from the HOA lot and attempted to reinstall them on your property. And you warned Miss Henderson that removing the posts would cause snow problems, but she ignored you." "That's exactly what happened, officer. I tried to negotiate a compromise, but she refused. I had every right to recover my stolen property." I gestured toward the community lot. "The damage there is a direct result of the HOA removing my snow fence in the first place. If they'd left it alone, the snow would have been caught before it reached their lot." Deputy Martinez followed my gesture, taking in the massive drifts covering the community lot. "That's going to be expensive to clean up. But based on what you've shown me, I don't see any criminal action on your part. Sounds like a civil property dispute. I'll need to file a report, but I'm not going to charge you with anything." He paused. "Though between you and me, you might want to get a lawyer. The HOA is going to come after you for this. Let them. I've got documentation of everything." I thanked him for his time, and he drove off, presumably to go tell Patricia that her criminal complaint was going nowhere. The real fireworks started Monday morning. I received a certified letter from the HOA's attorney, a firm based in St. Cloud, informing me that the HOA was suing me for $75,000 in damages. The breakdown included $20,000 for snow removal from the community lot, $30,000 for damage to vendor equipment and merchandise, $15,000 for refunds to vendors and attendees, and $10,000 for reputational harm to the HOA. The letter also informed me that I was being fined $5,000 for unauthorized interference with HOA infrastructure, and warned that failure to pay would result in a lien against my property. I immediately called a lawyer I'd found through a referral service, a property attorney named Rachel Donovan who practiced in Wilmer. Her office was a modest suite in a converted Victorian house near the courthouse, and she agreed to see me that afternoon. I brought all my documentation, and we spent 2 hours going through everything. Rachel was a sharp woman in her early 50s with short gray hair and reading glasses on a chain around her neck. She reviewed my documents with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd seen this type of case before. "This is interesting," she said finally, leaning back in her chair. "The HOA is way out of bounds here. You have clear documentation that the posts were your property, installed on your land. Their own work order proves they took them. The fact that you warned them about the consequences and they ignored you actually helps your case. So you think we can fight this?" I felt some of the tension leave my shoulders. "Oh, we're not just going to fight it. We're going to countersue them for the cost of your snow fence installation, your time and labor attempting to reinstall it after they damaged it, and any snow removal costs you've incurred as a result of the gaps in your fence. We'll also request attorney's fees." She smiled grimly. These HOA board members always think they can bully individual homeowners because most people don't want the hassle of fighting back, but they made a mistake with you. What about the fine they're trying to levy? Can they do that? I'd been worried about the $5,000 fine, which could lead to a lien on my home. They can try, but it won't hold up. You didn't violate any HOA rules. Recovering your own stolen property is an unauthorized interference. If anything, they're the ones who interfered with your property. She started drafting notes on her legal pad. "I'll file a response to their suit and our counterclaim by the end of the week. In the meantime, don't communicate with Patricia Henderson or anyone else from the HOA board except through me. Forward me any messages they send." I left her office feeling much better, though still angry about the whole situation. I'd moved out here for peace and quiet, not to spend my time dealing with lawsuits and HOA drama. The next few weeks were a blur of legal maneuvering, document exchanges, and mounting frustration. Patricia Henderson, it turned out, wasn't backing down. She sent increasingly aggressive messages through the HOA's attorney, insisting that I was responsible for the damage to the community lot. She'd rallied some of the other HOA board members to her side, painting me as a selfish newcomer who didn't care about the community. A few vendors from the canceled market posted negative reviews about me on Facebook, clearly fed information by Patricia, claiming I'd deliberately sabotaged a family-friendly event. I didn't respond publicly, on Rachel's advice, but it stung to see my reputation dragged through the mud in my new community. The HOA held an emergency meeting in mid-February to discuss the situation. I wasn't invited, despite being a homeowner in the association. Rachel filed a complaint about that, arguing that I had a right to attend and defend myself. The HOA attorney responded that it was an executive session closed to general members. The back and forth was exhausting, and I could see my legal bills mounting. The first break in the case came in early March. During discovery, Rachel subpoenaed the HOA's financial records and meeting minutes. What she found was illuminating. Apparently, Patricia Henderson had been using her position as HOA president to direct association business to companies she had financial interests in. The snow removal company she'd hired after the blizzard was owned by her brother-in-law, and they'd charged $35,000 for the cleanup work, nearly double the market rate. The vendor fees collected for the Winter Wonderland market, which she claimed totaled $15,000, had actually only been about $6,000, and most of that had been refunded. The rest had vanished into administrative costs that Patricia controlled. "This is bigger than your fence dispute," Rachel told me during a meeting in her office. Patricia Henderson has been mismanaging HOA funds for years. I've found at least a dozen instances where she's directed business to friends and family at inflated prices, probably getting kickbacks. Your fence situation just happened to be blatant enough that someone finally pushed back. What does this mean for the case? I was surprised by the scope of what she'd uncovered. It means we're going to win, and Patricia Henderson is going to have much bigger problems than your lawsuit. I'm required to report this to the Minnesota Attorney General's office. HOA board members are fiduciaries, and what she's done is potentially criminal embezzlement. Rachel was already drafting letters as she spoke. Will that help with the other homeowners? Some of them still think I'm the bad guy here. That had been bothering me more than I wanted to admit. I'd moved here to be part of a community, and instead I'd become a pariah. Once they find out their HOA fees have been lining Patricia's pockets for years, they'll change their tune pretty quickly. Rachel's expression was grim. Give it time. The news broke in late March. The Wilmer Tribune ran a front-page story about the investigation into the HOA's finances, complete with quotes from the Assistant Attorney General assigned to the case. Patricia Henderson's face was right there in the paper, a photo from her real estate website showing her confident smile that now looked like arrogance. The article detailed the findings. Over $200,000 in questionable transactions over 4 years, inflated contracts to family members, vendor fees that were collected but never properly accounted for, and reimbursements Patricia had given herself for HOA expenses that included personal dinners, spa visits, and a trip to Hawaii. The community exploded. Suddenly, my phone was ringing off the hook with neighbors apologizing, some of them in tears, explaining they hadn't known what Patricia was doing. The HOA Facebook group, which had been full of anti-Owen sentiment, completely reversed course. Several homeowners shared their own stories of Patricia's bullying tactics, arbitrary fines, and suspicious dealings. A petition circulated demanding her immediate resignation and the installation of new board leadership. Within a week, Patricia Henderson was removed as HOA president by an emergency vote of the membership. Gerald Murphy, the vice president, took over temporarily and immediately called me to apologize. "Owen, I'm so sorry about this whole mess. If I'd known what Patricia was doing, I would have stopped it. The board is withdrawing the lawsuit against you. Obviously. We'd like to offer a formal apology and compensate you for your legal fees and the damage to your fence." He sounded genuinely contrite. "I appreciate that, Gerald. But I'm going to let my attorney handle the details. I think you understand why I'm not inclined to take anyone's word right now. I wasn't going to be fooled twice. Absolutely. Have her call me. We'll make this right." He hung up, and I immediately called Rachel with the update. The settlement came through in April. The HOA agreed to pay me $12,000, covering my original fence installation costs, my snow removal expenses, and my legal fees. They also formally apologized in a letter sent to all HOA members, acknowledging that they had wrongfully taken my property and caused the damage to the community lot. Patricia Henderson was banned from ever serving on the HOA board again and was required to reimburse the association for the misappropriated funds. Her real estate license was suspended pending an ethics investigation. She put her house up for sale in May and moved out of the area, presumably to avoid the social stigma of what she'd done. The criminal case against Patricia took longer to resolve. The Attorney General's office charged her with embezzlement and theft by swindle in June. The amount she'd stolen was substantial enough to make it a felony, and the case attracted regional media attention as an example of HOA corruption. I was subpoenaed to testify at her preliminary hearing, where I explained the snow fence incident and how it had led to the discovery of the broader fraud. Patricia sat at the defense table looking smaller and older than I remembered, her lawyer whispering urgently in her ear. She'd apparently been trying to negotiate a plea deal, but the prosecution wasn't interested in going easy on her. The trial was set for September, but Patricia accepted a plea agreement in August. She pleaded guilty to 4 counts of felony theft, agreeing to repay the full amount stolen plus interest, and accepted a sentence of 2 years in state prison with 3 additional years of probation. The judge, a stern woman named Victoria Chan, made it clear during the sentencing hearing that she viewed HOA board corruption seriously. These communities entrust their board members with significant financial authority and responsibility, Judge Chan said from the bench. When that trust is violated for personal gain, it undermines the entire system. Ms. Henderson abused her position systematically over years, showing a pattern of deliberate theft from her neighbors. This sentence reflects the severity of that betrayal. I attended the sentencing, sitting in the public gallery. Patricia briefly made eye contact with me as the bailiff led her away, her expression blank. I didn't feel triumphant or vengeful. Mostly, I just felt tired. This entire situation had consumed nearly 9 months of my life, time I could have spent building furniture and living peacefully on my property. The community lot was repaired by May, with the new HOA board hiring a legitimate snow removal company to clear the remaining drifts and fix the damage to the vendor pavilion and parking area. They also installed their own snow fence on the community property, properly permitted and installed by professionals. Gerald Murphy asked me for advice on the installation, which I appreciated. I helped them source the materials and explained the principles of snow fence placement. It felt good to contribute something positive after all the conflict. My own snow fence was fully repaired by June, with all 72 posts back in their original positions. I'd added some reinforcement, concreting several of the posts in place to ensure they couldn't be easily removed again. The fence stood as a quiet testament to the whole ridiculous saga, its orange posts bright against the green summer grass. The new HOA board implemented serious reforms. They hired an independent accountant to review all financial transactions, implemented a requirement for competitive bidding on all contracts over $500, and established term limits for board positions. They also revised the bylaws to clarify property line issues and prohibit the HOA from using homeowner property without explicit written consent. I was asked to serve on the board myself, but I politely declined. I'd had enough of HOA politics to last a lifetime. Summer turned to fall, and I watched the leaves change color across my 40 acres with deep satisfaction. My furniture business was thriving, with commissions backed up for 3 months. I'd made friends with several neighbors, including a retired couple, Harold and Margaret, who lived 2 properties over and shared my love of woodworking. We'd get together some evenings to talk shop and share project ideas. Harold had been one of the first to apologize after the truth about Patricia came out, explaining that he'd been pressured by her to sign a petition against me, and had regretted it immediately. She had this way of making you feel like if you didn't go along with her, you'd be the next target, Harold told me one evening in my workshop. I knew what she did to you with those posts was wrong, but I was a coward. I should have spoken up. Don't beat yourself up about it. She was good at manipulation. That's how she got away with it for so long. I handed him a beer, and we watched the sun set through the open workshop door. Winter came around again, and the first major snowstorm hit in late November. I watched from my window as the snow fence did its job perfectly, catching the wind-driven snow and creating manageable drifts exactly where I wanted them. The community lot, now properly protected by its own fence system, also weathered the storm without issues. The new HOA board had organized a holiday gathering there, and I actually attended this time, bringing a maple cutting board I'd made as a raffle donation. People greeted me warmly, several thanking me again for exposing Patricia's corruption. It felt like I'd finally become part of the community I'd hoped to join when I bought the property. Gerald Murphy pulled me aside at the gathering. "I wanted you to know that we've dedicated a bench in the community lot with a plaque thanking you for your service to the HOA. It mentions how your vigilance helped protect the association's finances and integrity." I was genuinely touched. "That wasn't necessary, but thank you. I appreciate the gesture. It was the least we could do. You stood up when it would have been easier to just move away or give in. That took guts." He shook my hand firmly. The bench was installed in the spring, a beautiful red oak piece with a brass plaque reading, "Dedicated to Owen Strickland, whose integrity helped preserve our community. May we always remember that doing the right thing matters more than taking the easy path." I sat on it once, trying to figure out how I felt about having a memorial bench while I was still alive. It was a strange honor, but I decided to accept it in the spirit it was intended. I ran into Patricia's former neighbors, Tom and Jennifer, at the hardware store in town one Saturday. They'd been among the people posting negative things about me online during the initial controversy. Jennifer approached me hesitantly in the lumber aisle. "Owen, I know we've said this before, but I really am sorry about how we treated you. We were completely wrong and you didn't deserve any of that." She looked genuinely ashamed. "Water under the bridge," I said, and I meant it. Patricia was good at controlling the narrative. I don't hold it against anyone who believed her initially. It's just that we'd known her for years, and she seemed so trustworthy. When she said you'd sabotage the market, we believed her without question. We should have asked for your side of the story." Tom had joined his wife, nodding in agreement. "The important thing is that the truth came out eventually. The HOA is in better shape now than it's been in years." I selected a sheet of birch plywood, and Tom insisted on helping me load it into my truck. We ended up chatting for 20 minutes about community improvements and upcoming events. It was a small moment, but it represented how much had changed in the past year. The civil lawsuit Patricia had filed against me was formally dismissed with prejudice in March, meaning she couldn't refile it. My counterclaim was settled as part of the larger restitution agreement, with Patricia ordered to pay me $5,000 directly as compensation for the harm and stress she'd caused. I received a check in April, drawn on an account that was probably nearly empty given all her other financial obligations. I deposited it and donated half to the local food bank. I didn't need Patricia Henderson's money, but I did want to make something positive come from the whole mess. The Minnesota Association of Homeowner Associations, a state-level organization, used the case as a catalyst for proposing new legislation to increase oversight of HOA boards and protect homeowners from exactly the type of abuse Patricia had perpetrated. I was invited to testify before a state legislative committee in May, explaining how difficult it had been to fight back against an HOA president who wielded her authority without accountability. The committee members listened attentively, asking thoughtful questions about what safeguards might have prevented the situation or helped resolve it earlier. The resulting bill, which passed in August, required HOAs in Minnesota to file annual financial reports with the state, undergo regular audits, and maintain transparency in their operations. It wasn't perfect, but it was a significant improvement over the previous lack of oversight. By the time the second winter rolled around, life had settled into a comfortable rhythm. My property was secure, my business was profitable, and I had genuine friendships in the community. The HOA functioned smoothly under Gerald's leadership, handling basic maintenance and community events without drama or corruption. Patricia Henderson was in prison, serving her sentence at the Women's Correctional Facility in Shakopee. I didn't think about her often, except when someone new moved into the neighborhood and asked about the infamous HOA scandal. I'd give them the condensed version and watch their eyes widen in disbelief. All that over fence posts, they'd inevitably ask. It was never really about the fence posts, I'd explain. It was about power and accountability. Patricia thought she could do whatever she wanted because nobody had ever seriously challenged her. The fence posts were just what finally pushed someone to push back. The hardest part of the whole experience, looking back, wasn't the legal battle or the financial stress or even the temporary social ostracism. It was the realization that people I'd wanted to think well of me had been so quick to believe the worst. It had shaken my faith in community and human nature. But the resolution, watching people own their mistakes and work to do better, had restored some of that faith. Not all of it, and I'd certainly be more cautious going forward, but enough to keep trying. I finished a cherry wood dining table in October, one of the most complex pieces I'd ever attempted. The client was a family in Duluth who'd commissioned it for their anniversary. When I delivered it, they were so thrilled they actually teared up. The mother ran her hands over the smooth finish and turned to me. "This is going to be where our family gathers for generations. You've made something that will outlast all of us." That's what I loved about woodworking. The permanence of it, the way a well-made piece becomes part of a family's history. It stood in stark contrast to the pettiness and temporary nature of the HOA drama. Patricia Henderson's theft and corruption would be forgotten in a few years, but that table would still be hosting family dinners in 50 years. My snow fence would still be protecting my property long after everyone had forgotten why it became controversial in the first place. I got a letter in November from Patricia, forwarded through Rachel Donovan. Rachel called me before sending it over. "You don't have to read it if you don't want to. I can dispose of it." "No, send it. I'm curious what she has to say." The letter arrived 2 days later. Patricia's handwriting was neat and precise, the penmanship of someone who'd been taught proper cursive in school. The letter was surprisingly straightforward. "Owen, I'm writing this because my therapist says I need to make direct amends to the people I've harmed. You were right about the fence posts. I knew they were yours, and I took them anyway because I was angry that you hadn't asked permission to install them so close to the community lot. I know that makes no sense now, but at the time it felt justified. I also knew removing them before the storm would cause problems, but I didn't think it would be as bad as it was, and I didn't care enough to listen to your warnings. I'm not asking for forgiveness, because I don't deserve it. I just wanted you to know that I understand what I did was wrong, and I'm sorry." Patricia, I read the letter twice, then filed it away in the folder with all the other documents from the case. It was something, I suppose, an acknowledgement of wrongdoing. Whether it represented genuine growth or just checking a box for her therapist, I couldn't say. Either way, it didn't change anything. The harm was done, the consequences delivered, and life had moved on. Christmas that year was peaceful. I hosted a small gathering at my house, inviting Harold and Margaret, Gerald and his wife Susan, and a few other neighbors I'd become friendly with. We ate too much food, drank mulled wine, and swapped stories about the worst winters we'd experienced. Nobody mentioned Patricia Henderson or the lawsuit or the infamous snow fence incident. It was just neighbors being neighborly, which was all I'd wanted in the first place. As I stood on my porch after everyone had left, watching the snow fall softly in the security lights, I thought about the strange journey that had brought me here. I'd bought this property looking for solitude and peace, and instead, I'd found conflict and corruption. But through that conflict, I'd also found community, justice, and a deeper understanding of what it means to stand up for what's right even when it's difficult. The snow fence posts stood in their neat line along my property boundary, orange paint bright against the white snow, each one a small monument to the importance of defending your property, your rights, and your principles. My phone buzzed with a text from Harold. "Thanks for hosting tonight. It meant a lot to have somewhere to go. You've become a real part of this community, Owen. Glad you decided to stay." I smiled and typed back, "Wouldn't want to be anywhere else." And in that moment, standing in the cold Minnesota winter with snow swirling around me and my breath fogging in the air, I realized it was true. Despite everything that had happened, despite the stress and the anger and the disappointment, I'd found something valuable here. I'd found a place where I could be myself, where I could do work I loved, and where I could be part of something larger than myself. The HOA drama had been a crucible that tested me and the community, and we'd all come through it changed but stronger. The snow continued to fall, piling up in neat drifts exactly where my fence directed it, protecting my property just as it was designed to do. In the morning, I'd fire up the plow and clear my driveway in about an hour, the same task that would have taken half a day without the fence. Then I'd head into the workshop and continue work on my next commission, a walnut bookcase for a professor at St. Cloud State University. Life would continue in its rhythm, peaceful and productive, exactly as I'd hoped when I first moved here. The community lot was dark and quiet, its own snow fence doing its job without fanfare or controversy. The HOA's financial records were clean and transparent, available for any homeowner to review at any time. Patricia Henderson was 3 hours away in prison, learning whatever lessons she was capable of learning. And I was home, surrounded by 40 acres of Minnesota winter, doing work I loved in a community I'd fought for and ultimately earned the respect of. It hadn't been the easy path, but it had been the right one. And standing there in the snow, watching my fence do exactly what it was supposed to do, I knew I'd make the same choices again if I had to. Because some things are worth fighting for: your property, your principles, and your place in a community that values integrity over convenience. The snow fence post stood tall and firm, a testament to all of that and more.